Hello and welcome back to the channel. This episode is mainly aimed for beginners at Darktable, and I was contacted by Patrick, who follows the channel, and who was wondering what these technical modules are in the pipeline that already appear when you open a photo that you've never edited before. So I'll go through these modules, explain a little bit what they do, explain a lot that we're not going to really do much with them. And I will edit the photos, the raw file he sent, and I'll show you that you can edit a photo in Darktable just with a few simple clicks and get a decent result. And we'll compare that, well, the results I get with the JPEGs that he also was kind enough to send along with his raw files that he edited in Darktable too. So that's the plan. I'm Nicholas, and let's do this together. So we'll start now in the light table with these four raw files that have been provided to me by Patrick. We'll just start with one, and the aim is to understand what this pipeline is, what these technical modules are, and which ones we need to actually take any notice of, and the ones we need to ignore. So you may know that Darktable shows the pipeline from the bottom, which is the first module that's applied on the data, to the top one, which is the last one applied. So let's have a look quickly. The first one is raw black white point. This one, you notice, is grayed out, which means that even if I wanted to switch it off, I couldn't. Demosaic, I can't switch it off. Input and output profiles, I cannot either. That means that they are absolutely necessary to even imagine editing a photo. This one, if we open it, gives me four black points, one white point. This we don't need to touch. You can ignore it completely. Now, I know that it's a bit confusing for beginners, and I've been there too, believe me. This is the philosophy of Darktable, which is a philosophy of total transparency on what is being done to the image. Nothing, nothing, nothing is hidden. Now, these black levels and white points depend on the camera you have, and they will just tell Darktable where the information on the camera starts at, where it starts becoming visible, and when the photo, where the photo site is full. So that you can ignore this completely. White balance used to be in Darktable a module that we would touch because then you could change the temperature and tint of the color, and there were coefficients, and it was, I mean, as complicated maybe as the new one, which is color calibration, and that one we will play with. But white balance for me, as long as you are on the last one, which is as shot to reference here, then you can safely ignore that and just, I'll switch it off just to show you. Just say to yourselves that it's just changing all this green mess in the photo to normal colors. Now, just to explain why everything is green if white balance isn't applied, well, that is because each camera has a color matrix on top of the sensor. If I go to Wikipedia here, so you have the sensor. You may be familiar with this already. You have the sensor, which are the grey things underneath, which are the photo sites. They capture light independently of color. And if you want to get color back, then the idea we've had is to add a color filter. Now, the most common one is the Bayer filter. Fujifilm uses another array of colors. The idea is mostly the same. You have red, green, and blue. And if you take photo sites that are close to each other and mix them together, then you get a pixel uh, in that place in your photo. That is a kind of a very fast way of saying things. But notice that there's more green than red and blue, which maybe helps us to understand why, if we don't uh, use white balance, then everything is just kind of more green than anything else. So there we are. We have the white balance on. Safely ignore that. The next one up is highlight reconstruction. Now, highlight reconstruction will try and invent data where the information is being blown out in the camera. Now, in this photo, we have a little bit, I just clicked on this button down here. We have a little bit of information missing here in the photo. There we are. And switch that off. and this highlight reconstruction has done it again. Well, I'll just switch everything off. I'm not sure we'll actually ever see anything. Will we see something? There we are. We can look. Highlight reconstruction. There it's off, and there it's on. Right. Switch everything back on again because it's really awful. So that is a technical module that's doing the work for us just to kind of get some reasonable quality image in the areas where there wasn't any information. Now, there are quite a lot of methods here, the more complicated ones being segmentation and guided Laplacians. This one comes from Aurélien Pierre, who the Laplacians complicated maths, which is the diffuse and sharpen modules. The segmentation based, I'm not quite sure. I have played with all these, and really, well, what happened the most recently is the default is in paint opposed, which is a brilliant way of doing things. I mean, we always talk about the complicated mathematical ones that we need to try and understand. This one is probably mathematically complicated as well. In fact, I haven't a clue, but it works well. I never touch it. I just call this a technical module. It's on, leave it on. There we are. Next one up is Demosaic. Now, Demosaic will do what I was explaining here, but much better than what I was saying, is it will turn these red, green, and yellow red, green, yellow, red, green, and blue photo sites into all sorts of fancy colours we want to see on our image. Demosaic, leave it on. There are different methods. You can play with all these if you like. Just leave them alone if you don't understand them, as I don't. Colour smoothing, matching green. Will it change anything? Well, honestly, I can't see anything. Leave it. But Capture Sharpen is new. If it's not out, it will be out very soon. And this is interesting because it gives us some sharpening before, during the demosaic process, which means that before any artifacts or anything else can be done to the image. So that is interesting. And if I zoom in to something that is sharp in the image, so here I'm zoomed in 800%. So you will forgive me for thinking this is a bit blurry. But if I do capture sharpening before and after, you can actually see a visible difference. I'll zoom a bit more. Capture sharpening before and after. The standard is fine for me. Um, if you move it up or down, it does do something. The radius will also influence. Too much radius looks a bit awful. The measurements automatically doesn't seem fine to me. If you zoomed in too much, um, this imprecise radius calculation. So we'll zoom out. I don't know what this FR up there is. Anyway, we will. I'll reset that, and you can click on this to calculate contrast sensitivity. I'll explain this another day, but you can sharpen or not sharpen some parts of the image. Anyway, never mind. Leave that. I'm trying to control myself. This is a video for beginners. So as a beginner, leave it alone. White balance, leave it alone. Highlight reconstruction, leave it alone. Demosaic, click on capture, sharpen, and leave the rest alone. Orientation, well, this is pretty self-explanatory. It will automatically put the photo the right way around. Leave that alone. And then we come to the first module you need to take care of is exposure. So exposure is one slider. It's choosing the middle grey, the midpoint of your tonal values. By default, it will add on the compensation for the camera exposure. It will kind of expose as you did in your camera. I'm going to press on Command B, which is this little light bulb here, which gives me a white screen, and it gives me an idea of how light or how dark the photo is. This bright white light, which is the brightest my screen can get, is a good comparison point because your eyes will adapt to low light situations as they adapt to high light situations. But as this is the brightest your screen can do, it's a good reference point. So I'm going to move this up to what I think is a good exposure. I'm moving up quite a lot, which leads me to think that the photo was severely underexposed in the camera, which doesn't really matter, but that is what I imagine. So that is just the midpoint. Ignore the darks, ignore. You have to try and discipline yourselves. I don't have any problems here, but ignore the highlights. If they're blown out, it doesn't matter. The data, you have it. You have the data in the raw file. If you're not showing the data properly, then work needs to be done. But you cannot, in this linear scenario in Darktable, you cannot lose data as you go up the pipeline. So no worries about that. Exposure is done. I've fixed, I'll press on Control B, a medium exposure, and we'll go up to the next one, which is input color profile. You can't switch it off. It's a technical module. It's saying that we're going to take a standard color matrix from the camera and put it into our working profile, which is linear rec 2020 RGB, which I would recommend you keep. One day, maybe Rec 2020 will become Rec 2028. It has to be linear to work with the modules in the scene referred workflow. It is the best one for the moment until we have something new. So just leave that alone. And then we get to the next one, which we might play around with, which is color calibration. Now, color calibration is what we would call white balance, even if it is slightly different. It's also a difficult module, complicated. I have done a video on this if you're interested in going back to that one. But as a beginner or as someone who's experienced but just wants to go quickly through um, the most necessary steps to get a good photo quickly, I'd ignore most of this. Um, if you reset, we have what Darktable, it'll go to what the camera set the white balance at. If you're not satisfied with that, you have a picker here, which can pick, um, it'll make an average of everything in the frame. So this is assuming that the scene is completely grey, which it wasn't. So I don't think this often gives a good solution. If you have a grey card, well, that's fine. You just click on the grey card. Otherwise, try and find something which is a bit neutral. So it could be a white t-shirt, white clothes. It could be the road, if you like. If the road is a perfect grey, we're looking for a grey point. Um, Now, I don't think the camera was bad. I find it a little bit too green. So rather than, I wouldn't play with the hue slider, which is dangerously well, fast in change. I'm going to reset that. But I would play with chroma. Now I've got a problem at the moment with my mouse. Is without clicking, it's picking up the sliders, which is slightly annoying. You see, so I'm resetting, and I have to go round and go to chroma. Now I would play with chroma because this will give you some slight variations, usually in a daylight situation, from green to magenta. And this, if I double click, I was here, and I can bring back just a bit of color, which is quite good for the skin color, which I'm interested in. Now, it's quite normal to have a green cast when you're taking a photo of grass with light that's coming through trees. I'm going to reset that again and just lower the chroma just a little bit to add some magenta in. And that is all I'm doing with color calibration. The next one is not AGX. I will add two modules. I will always add a color RGB, color balance RGB, basic colorfulness. You can do standard, you can do vibrant. I will just put standard. That is because in the pipeline, nowhere has there been any boosting colors. And we know that raw files usually have a very flat profile. Um, so AGX will take care of the tones, which is from light to dark, but we need a 1 point, in my opinion anyway, to add a little bit of color into the photos. And something else we could add is some kind of sharpening, local contrast, call it as you like. You can go to the diffuse and sharpen if you just want to add a little bit. Contrast equalizer is fine. If you put it on sharpen, it's far too strong. Yeah, look at that, far too strong. But if we go down to a mask, which is masking the whole of the screen, I just have an opacity slider, and maybe you want to boost that just a tiny little bit, just to have on and off. It's subtle, you can see it mostly in the darker places, but that's adding a little bit of sharpening, a little bit of local contrast on top of the sharpening I had for Demosaic. So I think that's plenty enough. And let's go on to the big one, which is AGX. Now I'm going to use AGX and not Filmic or Sigmoid because, well, AGX is coming into the next master, so in the next release. It is available. There are some development versions you can find and download and use. In my mind, anyway, this is the future of Darktable because it has all the benefits of Filmic and Sigmoid in one. So rather than use Sigmoid or Filmic and then redo the video later, I'm going to do it with AGX straight away. Now, AGX is, well, it first of all gives you the impression I would have as a novice going into a commercial airplane into the cockpit and someone asking me to take off. There are so many settings and different tabs. We have lots of color tabs, lots of settings here. Now, I will do a video taking each slider in turn and explaining what they do. Right, so I can show you already that with one, two, three, four sliders, you can get 99% of the work done. The first thing is not a slider, it's a button. Auto tune levels, just go for it. Just click. It will set the white and black relative exposures like in Filmic. You don't need to touch those. They'll give a good starting point for your photo. So that's done and dusted. Next is the contrast. Now, the contrast is the slope around your fulcrum, the pivot, if you like. And the pivot point is set at the exposure point, which is 0, which will give me 18% grey. So just adding contrast around that fulcrum. And this, you can eyeball it. What I would do, I would recommend doing, is zooming out. So I'm pressing on Control to get the image smaller, or you can go for this button here with the white. But for contrast, I think contrast is something you notice from afar, and that is something that will I quite like it around there. And then with the mouse, I can zoom in again. So that's the contrast. Don't worry in the contrast about blowing out your whites or darkening the darks. That's separate. This is just around the mid-tones, the midpoints you've chosen. I can do toe power. Toe power is the toe of the curve is this part here, which is the dark. So I can darken the darks, lighten the darks, and I'm doing that independently. So I'm looking at the screen, I'm not looking at the curve. I'm looking at the darkest parts where it seems to have the most effect. There we are, and it looks okay around there. And the shoulder power will be the whites, how the whites go to white, whether we have a lot of contrast. Here we have quite a lot of contrast, meaning that I can see the details. And here I have everything that's a bit brighter, but I'm losing a little bit of contrast. So maybe I'm going to darken those and have something around here. And that seems to be fine to me. Once you've done that, I think you've done everything. Now, I'm going to recommend maybe one last one, which is saturation. You can have a last control of the saturation. Here, obviously, you can overdo it. Um, so I'm just going to add a little bit of saturation there just to make it pop. For the others, oh dear, it's lost the slider again. Going round, annoying, and there we are. And we're done. That's AGX. For the rest, so there's the pipeline. I don't need anything else from that to get a decent photo. I'm just going to frame this, if you don't mind, just for comparison's sake. If I want to compare to the JPEG that Patrick provided, so I'm just showing the file names with an F files there, from Nikon RAW. So here is the photo we have just edited together. And this is the photo edited by Patrick in Darktable. which he kindly provided. Now, the aim is not to say, oh, one's better than the other. It's just to show that we have two different processes. Now, there has been some cropping, maybe straightening, which I didn't do at all. I was just I just wanted to show the basic things. So quite a difference between the two. Um, and I hope you now understand that those that editing was done with some very few basic steps. And now I'll show you how to edit through the three other photos much faster. Once we have one done, we can do a whole batch of photos quite quickly. Now, there would be two ways of editing the batch. The one I usually go for is by styles, and I have my styles, and I have a basic color AGX and an AGX black and white, which use a few more modules. So I don't particularly want to use those with you today. But you could actually make a style out of this and then copy the style to the others. What I'm actually going to do, which is simpler for today, is if in one series you have a photo that is edited that you like, you can just copy the history stack, select the other photos, and paste the history stack. Now, we are going to have to re-edit the exposure in AGX, but apart from those, as you'll see, there's not much else to do. So in the first one, I'm going to re-initialize exposure and AGX. Contrast, equalizer, color balance, RGB, they're already there, so that's good. For the color calibration, I may have to tweak that a little bit, but I'm not even sure. I'm going to click on I'm going to remove the framing actually, if you don't mind. So this is exposure. So what I want is a global exposure that seems to be middle of the road. The subject I have needs to be exposed correctly. I'm looking at the face of this central subject here. Not bothered about the highlights, not too bothered about the shadows. Okay, color calibration. Do I need to touch it? It was fine. Um, I have decent skin colors. I'll just zoom in a little bit more. So this is the same color calibration as the previous photo. So I have added a little bit of magenta to it, which looks fine. I'm under trees here, so there is probably a green cast as well. I'm going to leave that alone. Contrast, equalizer, color balance, RGB, leave them alone. And now AGX. So just one button, auto tune, contrast. I don't need too much contrast here, actually. I'm looking mainly at the central character here, still not bothered about the highlights. And then I can do toe power. Toe power will add some darks. I'm adding some contrast in the darker tones, which looks quite realistic as we are in the shade here. And the shoulder power will say how the highlights are handled. Now, this photo has difficult highlights because we're blown out. If you look at this, the top of this histogram here has been cut off. And that is a sign, if I click on here, they will have quite a lot of clipping. So we'll never get smooth transitions in the highlights. But what we can do, what I'm going to do is actually brighten the shoulder quite a lot. And that will kind of render the idea that it is a kind of very bright out there. And there's less contrast also between the back of the t-shirt here, which is dark, and the front, which is white. If I go down, we kind of get a harder edge. I'm not too fond of that. Now, we have lost some detail. We haven't lost the detail completely in the ground here. We could get a local mask and get that back, but this is not the video for that. Um, so I'm going to leave that as it is. Maybe these trees look a little bit undersaturated. Uh, Now it keeps on catching these sliders. It's annoying here. A bit of saturation. There we are, because in the shade, colours seem to be a little bit more saturated. Um, there we are. And I'm not touching the others, and I'll explain what they're for another day. I'm going to resist tweaking this photo anymore and just say, okay, call it a day. That's the one, and move to the next. Spacebar to move forward in the film strip. Now, this one I will, same as before, initialize exposure and AGX. We will do Command B, uh, try and get a neutral. How bright should the glow of the photo be globally? Well, maybe something like this. The people in front are, well, they're silhouetted against the sun. They're under a tree, so they're going to be dark anyway. Control B, get rid of that. I'm going to color calibration. Now, I'm going to reset that. And we'll have a closer look. I actually think that we definitely want to add some magenta to it. Because if I leave it green, it's kind of, this is a kind of a spring green where it's very fresh and cool. I definitely prefer it with a little bit more magenta in. So that's all I'm doing to the white balance. Color RGB, leave it alone. Go to AGX, click Auto Tune, contrast. Now I don't want too much contrast on this. I'm going to lower the contrast quite a lot there. Maybe for the, I'll do the toe power first. I can get some contrast back just in the darks here because there's nothing really interesting in the information in the very dark parts. And the shoulder, well, I really want to leave that. If I go too high, then I'm losing colour in the sky. Maybe I'll leave that actually quite low. But I am going to add a little bit more saturation, obviously not too much. You can see this grass is green enough, it's not magenta at all. I'm actually going to give quite a lot of colour to this photo because I think it's quite a colourful scene. Typically a situation you remember where everything was bright and colourful. I'm actually going to leave that like that. There we are now, something's gone wrong. Colours have gone. Oh, wait, how much was I? There. Okay. That is far too coloured. Okay, this is the problem. Your eyes start losing it. Okay, 136. Moves all the time, it's awful. There. Okay? Hope I haven't moved anything. And we'll go to the last photo. So, as before, reset exposure and AGX. I will increase exposure. I'll do Control B again. Actually, not too much because this is a photo. The main subject is this mural here, which is kind of in a shady area. So we want to see it, but we don't want to over brighten. Maybe like that. I'll remove the Control B. It's gone again. I'm very sorry for this. It's maybe the last version I've downloaded. It seems to have a little bug with my mouse on the Mac. It's not usually like this. For those who are discovering Darktable, it works really well. Color calibration. I'll reset it to what it was like. That's very grey. Now I'm changing the temperature. Sorry, I don't usually change the temperature. We can. Ah, now I have lost my. Okay, I've gone Planking black body. I want to go daylight. Which one do I want? Should I do custom? There. In custom now. So I like having custom because I can make that more blue or a little bit browner. Uh, There we are. So I'll leave that like that. That's the color calibration, which has changed a little bit. There we are. Contrast equalizer, color balance RGB, leave them alone. And in AGX, let's set the white and black point. Contrast. Now I like having a little bit of contrast. I'm not looking at the highlights. I'm actually only looking at the subject here. Um, that being the subject of the photo, that's what I'm looking at. Toe power, I don't want to be too much, but I do like having a little bit of contrast and darks here. And shoulder power, well, if I go, this is the bright part, so I'm affecting this part that's in the light. I think I'm going to move that right down because bright parts of a photo will attract the eye, and I want the eye to be attracted here, and that seems to be okay. Um, what I would do, I'm actually going to do two extra things that I promised myself I wouldn't do. I have a preset called vignette, which basically takes the shape I choose and inverts it. So I'll make a vignette. So I choose an area, choose the feathering, click, and now it's darkening outside. There we are. So I've got a vignette. I'm trying to attract some attention to this painting here, and I can actually do an inverted vignette. Not sure those have a name. Just a new instance. The idea is to take a place you like in the photo and just choose that, and then you have to be very careful here. Just brighten it just a little bit. That is basically just to attract some attention. And the idea is to get the transition, there we are, to be nice and smooth. And if it was a photo I wanted to spend some time on, I would add some extra contrast maybe in colours here. But as we're doing kind of a beginner's introduction to the pipeline, I am going to leave it at that. I think, yes, I'm going to leave it at that. I'm resisting. So the light table is here. These are the photos I've edited. I'm now going to remove the filter so we can compare very quickly with what Patrick sent me. We've already seen this one. So before that is my edit I've just done with you, and that is Patrick's previous edit. This is a JPEG he sent me. I don't have the raw file, which is unfortunate because I do have a nice sunlight here, but actually I quite like the edit he made. This is the edit I made, and this is his. Not much difference. Maybe a little bit brighter in the skin tones. Um, very little difference I feel here. In this photo, so quite bright and sunny. That is my edit, and this is Patrick's. There we are. And this is my edit of that mural, and this is his. So there's been some cropping and recentering here, but basically that is what we have between the two. Um, so the idea, as I said, is not to say one is better than the other. The idea is just to show that in a few simple steps, you can get a pretty decent image out of Darktable. Um, well, there we are, folks. That is the pipeline. Anything you want to add to your pipeline, you are free to go into the manual, watch some videos, and say, oh, what does this module do? Oh, I think I'll learn how to use this module and put it on. Typically, you want to start with denoise and with the lens corrections, which I could have showed you. You can just actually switch these on. Denoise and lens correction, which it doesn't want to do because it can't find the lens and camera. Okay, well, if it wants to sulk, it can sulk, it doesn't matter. Denoise will just do it automatically. And then there are some which you can learn which will do different things. And there are plenty of videos on the internet now to learn how that is done. But you have a starting point to get some nice photos. There we are. I'll leave you there and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.